Hello, I'm Peggy Carruthers, Custom Content Manager at Food News Media, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, 5 Things You Need to Know About Gen Z. Gen Z is now the largest age demographic in the United States. While they may be young, relationships and brand affinity formed during this time can build loyal relationships down the road. Unlike the generations before them, members of Gen Z are digital natives, leading them to have different expectations when it comes to the restaurant experience. In today's webinar, we'll learn what you need to know to appeal to this younger group and how they differ from the generations that came before them. We will be taking your questions at the end of the program, so you can ask questions at any time during the webinar, even though we'll be answering them at the end. So we encourage you to ask them whenever they come to you. You can click on the dialog box in the upper right-hand corner and then click on the questions tab to submit. And now to begin, our presenter today is Jessica Shilkuski, Content Marketing Specialist at Paytronics. Jessica, welcome, and please take it away.
Great, thanks, Peggy. So as Peggy mentioned, I am Jessica Shilkuski, and I work on the content marketing team here at Paytronics, specializing in the restaurant industry. And this is going to be today's agenda. So we'll start with the 5 things that you should know about Gen Z, followed by some information that we've learned about how they feel about order and delivery. And finally, bring this all back to how you can reach them now and turn them into loyal customers to build that relationship that can benefit you as they age and really begin to come into their own as the most dominant consumer segment. But who is Gen Z? So with the generations, the years sometimes vary by a year or so in either direction, but for the most part, Gen Z are people born in about 1996 to 1997. In 2018, Gen Z made up just about 28% of the US population, followed by baby boomers and millennials, each at about 22%, and Gen X at 20%. So if you're trying to do the math right now to figure out the ages of each group rather than birth years, baby boomers are currently about 55 to 73 years old. Gen X is about 39 to 54. Millennials are 24 to 38, and Gen Z is 9 years old to 24. So those older Gen Z members, those ones that are in their early 20s, are really coming into their own as consumers, and knowing more about them and how they differ from those generations before can help you convert them into loyal customers for years to come and give you some insight into how that younger end of their generation is likely to act as well. So by next year, in 2020, Gen Z is projected to make up 40% of all consumers. And while Gen Z shares a lot in common with millennials, there are some differences in the way they interact with each other, with technology, and also the way they view the world. So when you look at comparing Gen Zs and millennials, those younger 2 generations, to each other, this is kind of some of the comparisons between the 2. So one way they differ is how they communicate. So for Gen Z, it's strongly through images rather than text. And you can see this in the social media platforms that they interact with most, like Instagram, Snapchat, and now TikTok, which are all very visual. A Gen Zer is as likely to communicate through a GIF as through any other method. And again, you can also see this through those social media platforms, which have made searching for GIFs even easier and embedded right into their platforms. Some of the other ways these generations are different is in their focus and their mind views. So Gen Z is very focused on the future. They're much more likely than a millennial to have taken financial literacy courses. So while millennials may be more likely to splurge and treat themselves, Gen Z is much more frugal and value focused. They're also realists compared to the optimism of millennials. And some of this stems from the economic situations from when they were raised. So for millennials, many of whom grew up in the 90s and kind of experienced the dot-com bubble, they grew up during good times. So when a recession occurs, they see it as a blip and they feel confident that the good times are going to come back. Whereas for Gen Z, most of whom were born in a post 9/11 world and whose youth coincided with the last recession, this has made them take a worldview as realists rather than optimists. And finally, another difference between the 2 is that Gen Z wants to work for success versus millennials who want to be discovered. So this brings us to the 5 things that are important to know about Gen Z. Gen Z are tech natives. They are brand conscious, value conscious, health conscious, and also big fans of convenience. So we're going to dive into each of these in a little bit more detail. So first, tech natives. Gen Z is the first generation to be entirely made up of digital natives. They've never known a time without the internet, and their lives have largely included smartphone technology. They're digitally savvy and are very accustomed to being interactive with their phones, especially with social media and with the internet as a whole. So this is one of the big differences between Gen Z and the generations that came before them. Even the older millennials grew up in a world largely without this type of technology. I'll call myself out as one of these older millennials. Personally, I didn't get my first cell phone until I was 17, and my parents were nervous about me driving. And that phone wasn't even a flip phone. It was before flip phones. All you could do was make some calls and maybe send a text message that took maybe 10 minutes to type out. We didn't get dial-up internet at home until I was in high school. So when you compare that to Gen Z, who likely had smartphones for, as long as they can remember and information right at their fingertips, it's quite a different experience. Millennials were young enough to adapt to the changes in tech with ease and still be comfortable, but for Gen Z, they know nothing else. And these are some of their tech usage stats. So Gen Z uses up to 5 different social media channels, mostly Snapchat and Instagram. And 91% of them even take their smartphones to bed with them. They use 55% use their smartphones for more than 5 hours per day, and 25% use their phones for 10 or more hours a day. So they're very connected to their phones. It's almost an extension of themselves. So it's a very effective way to reach this generation. We mentioned before that they use up to 5 social media channels. 73% of Gen Z follows at least one brand on social media, and 52% follow 3 or more. So creating that brand identity that can interact with people on social media is something that they're likely to appreciate. And again, some of their popular social media and different media outlets is 85% use YouTube, which is one of the most popular platforms that Gen Z uses. 72% use Instagram and 69% use Snapchat. In a recent study conducted by the National Retail Federation and IBM, 15,000 people across 6 continents were surveyed surveyed regarding the technology that they use. And Gen Z's technology of choice, no surprise, is the smartphone, followed by the laptop computer in a distant second place. They use their devices to do almost everything, from texting and chatting to accessing entertainment to doing schoolwork and shopping. So it should come as no surprise that they're the most well-versed generation when it comes to online spaces. Given this, the experts have determined that they desire things more quickly and conveniently than past generations, and typically have a shorter attention span of about 8 seconds. The average attention span of a millennial was 12 seconds, and the average attention span of a goldfish is 9 seconds. So Gen Z's attention span is very short. So with an attention span of 4 less seconds compared to millennials, again, this goes back to how they like to communicate through images. You can communicate a lot more quickly through images than you can relying on someone to read text, where millennials with a longer attention span are a little bit more willing to take the time to read a message. And everyone wants to feel unique, of course, but Gen Z is especially focused on their individuality and really wants that brand to speak to them and market to them on a one-to-one basis. They understand technology capabilities, and this is what they expect. They expect personalized and insightful messages and offers. They view technology as a natural standard tool, and they're very data savvy as well. So while millennials grew up in an age when it was exciting to share data and sign up for any new program, Gen Z is aware of the problems that giving out personal data can lead to. And they're willing to give out their data, but only if the benefit to them is strong and clear. In a National Restaurant Association study, 6 out of 10 millennials reported that they'd like restaurants to use tech to provide more detailed information about food as well, like nutrition, allergens, and sourcing. These are expectations that they share with Gen Z, a generation who values transparency and wants all this information to be very easy to find. And then the second thing to know about Gen Z is that they're brand conscious. They're aware of any political affiliation brands may have. They're aware of the perceived stance a brand would take on social issues. And for many, they really want to align with brands that they believe in and that they feel reflect their own beliefs. It's also very easy for this generation to find things because they are so tech savvy. So any scandal that maybe 25 years ago might have had headlines that maybe you could bury, that lives forever on the internet. So this generation is very able to dig things up and make sure that this is a brand that they feel is worthy of their money and that they want to connect themselves to. 62% of Gen Z find themselves attracted to these brands that are viewed as fun or cool as well. So what do they want from a brand? Gen Z cares about people, and they will react very strongly to any negative impression they have about your staff and how your staff is treated. So since your employees are often the first line of communication with your customers, it's important that they're well-informed, well-trained, and happy within the company. A little employee displeasure goes a lot further than you might think. This generation has a firm understanding of its impact in the world and as well how the way it spends its money impacts it too. So they expect businesses to have high standards when it comes to ethically sourcing food, being eco-friendly, and treating its workers and customers ethically and with respect. Just selling won't cut it anymore either. Customers want to be inspired, educated, or entertained by brands. So restaurants need a point of view and need to share that point of view regularly with compelling, engaging, and on-brand content. Great content extends that relationship beyond the point of purchase and help keeps a brand top of mind. We mentioned before their shorter attention span, so that content needs to be super compelling in order to capture them. And also, nearly everything is shared on social media. Guests want to share their experience on social and are going to do so if it's good, and unfortunately, also if it's bad. But they really want to do things that are unique and memorable and also shareable. So make sure you create an experience for those guests that they'll want to share and kind of create some good buzz for you as well. The third thing to keep in mind is that Gen Z is also value conscious. Since they're still so young, they don't have a lot of the financial responsibilities of the older generations yet, and they have an estimated 143 billion in spending power. In a study by Unidays, 78% of the respondents said that besides tuition and bills, they spend a majority of their money on food. And they also want real value for their money as well. So keeping in mind this sense of frugality that Gen Z has is also important to getting to know how to reach them as well. We mentioned this in the beginning of the presentation, but they're 3 times more likely than millennials to have taken a financial education class. So that makes them very value conscious. They understand the value of money. So they're driven by discounts and are willing to change their planned purchases or meals if a discount is offered for an alternate option. While the millennial generation was generally more open to taking risks, Gen Z is a little bit more cautious and opportunistic. They're much more likely to weigh the benefits and costs before making decisions and taking actions. 93% of survey respondents said that they were more likely to dine at a restaurant that offers student discounts, and 91% of Gen Z surveyed would be willing to eat at off-peak times for a discount. So they're willing to make some of those sacrifices to their schedule and maybe to their plans in order to get a good deal. And the fourth thing to note is that they're very health conscious. Gen Z also has a global perspective, and they're very aware of different food options around the world, and they expect to have access to them closer to home. The world seems a lot smaller to them than for previous generations, and so there's also an interest in diversity and globalism that they want to extend to their food choices. While other generations may feel more comfortable eating the food they know and perhaps grew up with, this generation is interested in food and cuisine that they don't know, and they want to explore. They know that there are a lot of other diets and other lifestyles that may interest them. And just being health conscious is really just one aspect of really wanting a wide assortment of dietary options as well. And these are just some of the numbers on Gen Z and their preferences for healthy options. 47% of Gen Z weighs health benefits when making food purchase decisions, and 55% of them rate being healthy as very or extremely important when choosing food. So not only is this what they want, but it's also something they're willing to pay for. While they may be very value conscious and careful with the money they have, 41% are willing to pay more for food that is healthy. So we mentioned before that they want value for their money. So in this case, what they value is their health, and that's something they're willing to put more money toward. And while today we're more focused on the restaurant industry, it's also important to note as convenience stores continue to improve their fresh food offerings, and in some cases are also getting involved in delivery or catering, that almost 86% of Gen Z survey respondents said that they were very likely to purchase food at convenience stores if there were more healthy options as well. And speaking of convenience, the fifth thing to know about Gen Z is that that's what they want. Instant gratification and customization are key for making members of Gen Z happy. They've grown up with brands like Starbucks that offer quick food solutions that are customized exactly to their preferences. And advances in mobile ordering and delivery have made this even more the norm. So they're not accustomed to having to be patient or compromise on their preferences. Along similar lines, they expect purchases to be both easy and convenient. They're more willing to shop places where lines are shorter, and they're likely to entirely abandon a purchase if a line is too long. Convenience also drives their food orders, with a quarter of Gen Z survey respondents saying that they order food when they don't have the time to energy or cook. And according to a study by Morning Consult, these are the top 25 brands for Gen Z consumers. You can see their youth reflected in the presence of a lot of gaming platforms and entertainment brands. But you can see that restaurants that got into the top 25 are mostly affordable for teens that have an allowance or a part-time job. So you can see Chick-fil-A and Dunkin', Pizza Hut, Subway, which are also often quick grab-and-go options. The only full-service restaurant making an appearance here is IHOP. But you see that a lot of their favorite brands are snacks as well that you would pick up at a grocery or convenience store, like Oreos and Doritos, both in the top 10. And you also see some appearances by Sprite and Skittles as well. So it's always helpful to see why these brands are resonating with this audience and what your brands can do to target this group as well. It's interesting to see Dove so high up among a young group, but their campaigns tend to focus on authenticity as well as some good social messaging around body image and self-esteem. And that messaging is something that Gen Z finds important. You also see that a lot of these brands appeal through humor, which is definitely a way to grab that short attention span and get them really interested as well. And so thinking back to convenience stores, as convenience stores continue to provide fresher and healthier meals, and like I mentioned, also go look into delivery, keeping up with what Gen Z feels about those options is some good insight into what restaurants can do as well. So liking grab and go options, that really speaks to their desire for convenience. So for restaurants to compete with some of these feelings, you could have available options ready for grab and go. For example, some coffee shops will have easy pickup sandwiches or salads. Or you can make the ordering process quick so that guests aren't waiting in lines, whether it's through order ahead capability, so a Gen Zer can just swoop in and grab their order when it's ready. This generation is on the move and they don't want to have to wait. And so this brings us into kind of what they feel about online ordering and delivery. So only 5% of college students plan their meals ahead of time. So they're very much driven by impulse and in the moment decision making. One of the interesting things to notice is brand loyalty doesn't really play into their ordering decisions at the moment because they haven't had a chance to develop strong relationships with those brands yet. So there's a huge opportunity to form that bond right now. So we here at Paytronics worked with some students at Tufts University who surveyed Gen Z members, mostly aged 18 to 22. It is at the moment kind of difficult to survey minors. Also, their habits are a lot less developed and they're very reliant still on their parents for basic necessities like food and their finances. So looking at this survey, out of the people who took the survey, 39% order food around 1 to 2 times per week, 40% order food 1 to 2 times every few weeks, 11% order food 3 to 5 times per week. And one of the main reasons is convenience. 25% of Gen Z respondents cited a lack of time or energy as their main reason for ordering food. 29% said that they turn to food ordering to satisfy particular cravings, and 21% order food to celebrate a special occasion or just to splurge. So many members of this generation live at home or are on college meal plans. So their need to provide their own meals isn't quite there yet. They're much more likely to order to share experiences with friends or to celebrate. And how do they order? In the same study we did with the students at Tufts, we wanted to find out what their preferred ordering methods are. And what we found is that 58% order food either using a third-party app or website, and only 23% are using restaurant-branded apps or websites. So this does show a strong preference among Gen Z customers for ordering food from a third party rather than directly from a restaurant. To get a deeper analysis into why they felt this way, we asked our respondents what qualities they like best about third-party apps. And of the 8 options we gave them, the top 3 most common responses were the convenience of having a variety of restaurants on one platform, being able to discover new foods, and the homogeneity of the browsing, selection, and checkout process. So over 52% also said that they don't order food regularly enough to justify using a restaurant branded app, which was a big percentage compared to 13% who said they don't like the options available, or 11% who said that high delivery fees were a deterrent to using restaurant branded apps. So some of these results were a little puzzling because, for example, the high delivery fees on restaurant branded apps, which are often no different or even less than third party fees. But the 52% that say that they don't order enough to justify using a restaurant branded app shows an opportunity to create apps that this generation will find useful now, so that as they do become responsible for more of their own meals and likely ordering more frequently, that they know what these apps can provide. 21% of the respondents prefer to call the restaurant directly when ordering food, which is a clear-cut preference for the convenience and speed that can come through direct contact, especially because phone numbers are clearly listed on search results. And since they're likely searching on a mobile phone, it's easy to just tap the phone number and speak, sometimes rather than navigating through the mobile version of a website. 18% do like to go to the restaurant branded website. 16% said that they use the third-party services but use their website instead of the mobile apps. But only 4% are using restaurant-branded apps to order food. So to understand more about how Gen Z viewed delivery fees, this one respondent who's quoted on the slide said that she always considers delivery fees, like on the Uber Eats app, because even if she was going to order a smoothie, if a different restaurant is having free delivery at that time, she pretty much always ends up ordering from the different restaurant because she feels like she's getting a better deal this way. So this shows that Gen Z tends to focus their attention on the added fees rather than the price of the meal itself. So the free delivery is what is driving her order because it feels like she's getting a better deal. So again, that brings you back to that value conscious attribute that we mentioned previously. But what would cause a shift to the restaurant branded apps? The main reason Gen Z isn't using restaurant apps isn't necessarily a distaste for them. In many cases, it's a lack of awareness. So 60% of the respondents said that rewards programs would make them use a restaurant branded app over third party apps. Many restaurant branded apps are integrated with a loyalty program. So in some cases, it might be a case of needing to educate Gen Z customers on what is available to them in some of these apps. Having offers available in the app was another reason that they would be more likely to use the restaurant apps. 16% of respondents also said that faster delivery speeds would be a factor that would change their opinions towards restaurant branded apps. So for a lot of brands that have kept delivery in-house, often that's one of the reasons why. So if you have an in-house delivery fleet and quick delivery times, you should definitely promote that as much as possible to appeal to this group. They're very impulse driven. So in the same discussion with some current college students, one said she had an experience with one of the third-party sites where her delivery actually took several hours to get to her. And obviously something went wrong there, but if this is something that's happening frequently, to this age bracket, they're definitely going to want things quicker. So if you can advertise that, that would definitely be an important selling point to them. And keeping in mind that Gen Z is still really maturing as a generation, it's early to make some bold statements about how they will or will not behave as consumers. There are still a few things that you can do in order to appeal to them both now and later. So what we think we might know about Gen Z now may change as more of them are responsible, again, for providing meals for themselves. But it's important to reach them now and interact with them at the start so that you can detect any shifts in their behavior along the way to really help you connect with them down the line as well. So how you can reach them is Gen Z exhibited some confusion and lack of awareness of restaurant apps and rewards programs. And getting them enrolled is the first step to numerous other levers that you can pull once they're in your program. So integrating your loyalty program to your order and delivery platform so that they're able to earn rewards and get that value is something that would appeal to them. We mentioned before that they're very value focused because a lot of them are full-time students. So, they're driven both by impulse and value, which is the danger of the third-party aggregators versus your own branded ordering page. So if someone had your brand in mind when they opened the app, but free delivery somewhere else made them change their mind, you're the one that's missing out. So since they focus on fees even more than their tastes or cravings, there's opportunities to maybe offer free delivery or discounted delivery for members. That would be something that would also appeal to Gen Z. And convenience isn't just a preference with Gen Z, it's a requirement. So they'll absolutely abandon any brand that doesn't offer the level of ease and low friction purchasing that they're looking for. So brands should have a mobile presence and incorporate high convenience services like online ordering, curbside pickup, delivery, and pay at table. Gen Z is interested in dining at off hours if they get a discount. So while early bird specials might be something reserved for senior citizens, you might also be able to run other specials to drive students in, maybe if they show a student ID during off-peak hours. And this works just as well with orders placed off-premise. So Gen Z would have no problem ordering a burrito, let's say, at 4 instead of 6 if they were offered a discount during maybe 3 to 5 p.m. So they'll come in earlier or even later to get those deals. Gen Z also shows an interest and willingness to be able to earn rewards and get special offers. So, getting them into your program will help you reach them later. Right now, their selection pool is wide for places that they're willing to try and test out. But as they're responsible for more and more meals, it's likely to start to narrow down to a few favorites, as it has done for millennials. So to summarize, Gen Z is a generation of tech natives. So keeping up with tech innovations has really moved from nice to have to need to have. Their short attention span means that you really need to break through the clutter and either entertain or inspire them to get their attention. They're open to loyalty and rewards programs, though they seem to be somewhat currently unaware and uneducated on all of their options. And high financial literacy at a young age has resulted in a frugal generation that is seeking value. So now I believe we'll head into the question and answer session.
Great. Thanks so much for that information, Jessica. So please don't forget, you can submit questions now too. You can use the submit functionality on your webinar console to ask a question at any time. Click on the dialog box in the upper right-hand corner and then click on the questions tab. We do have a couple that have already come in. So since it's hard to know so much about Gen Z before they come of age, what's the best way to prepare?
So like we mentioned before, the best way to prepare is to try to get them enrolled in your program so that as their preferences shift, you can really track their changes in behavior through your customer purchase data and really be able to influence their purchases that way. If you think about it, by the time the youngest members, who are now 9 years old, are adults 10 years from now, who knows what the technology landscape will be and what the industry will look like? Because if you think about 10 years ago, it was completely different than it is now. So really, in order to keep up both with changing times and their changing preferences, the more data that you can get on them, which may be enrolling them in your loyalty program, that will only really help you down the line.
Great. And are there parts of loyalty programs that are best suited for Gen Z specifically?
So Gen Z, like we mentioned, is really attached to their phones, but they're currently not super interested in downloading apps. So having ways to engage with them that might use their phone, but maybe don't include an app, could be very effective. So it could be using text to join codes in order to enroll in your program, where they just have to text a number to enroll. That's something that could resonate with them. Having the ability to identify by phone number at your POS system, also maybe so that they don't need to have an app to identify. Or something else that's up and coming is being able to register for loyalty programs and also identify through NFC tap. So when a guest pays by Apple Pay or Google Pay, that tap can also ID them as a member of the program or prompt them to enroll. We find that people that are using that kind of NFC loyalty ID tend to be 5 years younger than the average customer. So this is something that is resonating with younger guests and is ways that you can interact with them through their phone, which is a technology that they like, but doesn't need to be an app. So I think those would all be really, really good ways.
Wonderful. And do millennials differ from Gen Z much in the ways that they order? We've seen Gen Z has a heavy preference for third-party apps.
Yeah, so they do actually. And it's part of the study that we did. So we saw with Gen Z restaurant apps at 4%. For millennials, it's 16%, and restaurant websites are up at 15%. So while with millennials, the third-party apps are still number one, you see that they're much more likely to have a favorite brand and to either go directly to that brand's website or have downloaded the app already. And some of that is because they also just order much more frequently to develop those favorites. Whereas for Gen Z, ordering is still somewhat of a rare occurrence for them. They're only maybe doing it once a week. So they haven't developed like high brand loyalty yet, which is a huge opportunity. But it's also why the behavior is a little bit different for millennials.
Right. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. So thank you, Patronix and Jessica, for making this program possible, and to our audience for attending. A recording of the webinar will be available soon, and you'll be receiving an email letting you know when that's available. I hope you all have a great day. Thank you again.